Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of it's technically the Tuesday morning recap after a pretty dominating performance on Monday Night Football. Yes, we're going to talk about the Vikings, we're going to talk about the Bears, we're going to talk about the Packers, and the Lions even got a win this past weekend against the football team, I believe is who they played. But starting off with our favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings, after starting the season 1-5, they've started figuring things out, and much to my surprise, they have figured things out. So last night, the Vikings took on the Chicago Bears in Chicago, which, as all Viking fans know, the Bears are always a pain in the butt, especially on the road at Soldier Field. But they emerge victorious on a cold and blustery Monday night in Chicago on ESPN's Monday Night Football, beating the Bears 19-13. And I'm going to be honest with you. So the Vikings took a 19-13 lead on Adam Thielen's second touchdown catch of the night. And then Lieutenant Austin Cutting's snap to Britton Colquitt was less than desirable, and they don't even get the extra point off. Cutting does the fire drill and just throws it into the back of the end zone. Now I know what you're thinking. It was the same thing I was thinking. Oh, here we go. We're going to lose this game 20-13, 20-19. Bears are somehow going to get a touchdown, and we're going to lose. Well, the heartbreak of the past is becoming more and more of the past as the Vikings put on an absolutely dominating performance on defense against a pretty hapless Chicago Bears offense, whose focal point on offense was Cordero Patterson. Now, I've always been a CP fan. I've always been a Patterson fan since he was with the Vikings. He's really explosive and very, very exciting to watch, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. But their offense is absolutely horrendous. Nick Foles, who do you go with, Nick Foles or Mitch Trubisky? Mitch Trubisky's carried an injury designation the last few weeks. Who knows what the actual issue is, but that offense is not good. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't even pass the ball against the Vikings defense, and that young secondary and defensive line who have started, like I said last week, the more reps they get, the more experience they get, the better they're going to be this year and down the road. Looking at some stats, again, the Vikings win 19-13. Kirk Cousins played pretty great and got that monkey off his back. The 10th time was the charm. He finally won a Monday Night Football game. It was on the road. It was against a team that was above 500 at the time. Chicago came into the game at 5-4, the Vikings 3-5. But Kirk Cousins, 25 of 36, throwing the ball for 292 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception that, no matter how you look at it, it's not on Cousins. It hit Thielen in the chest, bounced out, and Khalil Mack was in the right place at the right time, much like Harrison Smith was at the beginning of the game. But Cousins, a very effective, very efficient evening, 25 of 36 for 292, 2 and 1 interceptions. Dalvin Cook, for as terrible as the Chicago Bears offense is, their defense is equally as great. Akeem Hicks, Roquan Smith, Danny Trevathan, Khalil Mack, they're all beasts. And Cook had some problems in this one. He did go over 100 all-purpose yards. He had 30 carries for 96 yards, and I think around 15 or 20 receiving yards. But Akeem Hicks actually got hurt Kirk Cousins was rolling out to his right, and he was chasing him down. He pulled up a little gimpy, and was out for the remainder of the game. And that's when Dalvin Cook started ripping off, 4 or 5 yard runs. Now they weren't the what we've become accustomed to, those 10, 15, 20 yard runs every time he's touching the ball. However, against that defense, which is extremely formidable, 96 yards, almost 100 yards on the ground for Dalvin Cook, when last week Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, pure runners. I'm not talking about explosivity out of the backfield. Thank you, Pete Bursich, for that word. But because Alvin Kamara and a couple of these other guys, they have that explosivity, but as pure runners between the tackles, outside, Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry are the two best in the game, and Derrick Henry only ran for like 60-something yards against this team, but Cook almost goes for 100. He got 30 carries. He touched the ball close to 40 times, which is what the Vikings need to do in order to be successful, establish that run so that it brings up those linebackers and safeties to the line of scrimmage. But 3.3 carries a yard, 3.3 yards a carry, not great, but much better than he's done in the past against this team, only averaging about 30 yards per game in his few games he's had against the Bears. Justin Jefferson was a stud yet again, 8 receptions for 135. Now, Justin Jefferson, he became only the second Minnesota Viking to have 4 100-yard receiving games in his rookie season. The other one, Mr. Randy Moss, the HOFer, Randy Moss, and that's tied for a Vikings rookie record, and I gotta think he's got a really good chance of breaking that record. He's just got to get one more, and that kid is a stud. Now, you look back at the off season. I've said it. Stephon Diggs, I got nothing bad to say about the kid. His personality just didn't fit with the Vikings, and when he got traded to Buffalo, I was actually pretty happy for him. He wanted out. He went out to Buffalo. He caught what most people thought was the game-winning touchdown of that game against Arizona until Kyler Murray went all Aaron Rodgers on him, and Denard Hopkins, in his hands are, I'm not kidding you, his hands are like two of my hands. He wears 6X gloves. But he caught that Hail Mary from Kyler Murray. But I'd say it was a pretty good trade-off. Getting Diggs out, he didn't want to be here. He was unhappy, and getting that first-round pick that we spent on Justin Jefferson, I'd say it was a really good trade-off. It worked out for everybody involved, or has worked out for everybody involved. And Justin Jefferson is showing that he is the real deal. He is a game-changing wide receiver. And when you look at how Jefferson plays, he's not just a get the ball, get down, don't get hit kind of guy. He fights for those extra yards. He had 3 or 4 receptions last night where he caught it and turned up the field, even with contact, gaining another 5 to 10 yards after contact. So really happy with Justin Jefferson. Like I said, Adam Thielen had two touchdown receptions. Hold on one moment. Yes.
I can't see Mrs. Weaver page.
Okay, I'll be out in a minute.
Okay. He's doing a video.
The beauty of distance learning, folks. The beauty of distance learning. So, but Adam Thielen, he had somewhere around 60 yards, but he had those 2 touchdown receptions. His first reception was, his first touchdown reception was an amazing one-handed catch in the back of the end zone. Just a stud. He did have that one flub that he bobbled the ball. That was a perfectly thrown ball from Kirk Cousins into the hands of Khalil Mack, but It is what it is. Uh, Kyle Rudolph was also a big factor last night. He did have a fumble, or a fumble. I still don't think it was a fumble. However, they ruled it a fumble. But the Vikings got the ball back right away after that, and did what they do. So again, the Vikings 19, the Bears 13. A couple of points here. The defense is playing extremely well. Now I know they were going against the Chicago Bears and their offense is awful. However, um, for as much flack as I have given Mike Zimmer this year, and I still don't think he is the answer at head coach for the Vikings, he's gotten these boys ready to play, and he's got a game plan that has been absolutely solid with keeping those safeties in a cover two or a two deep safety look with Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris back there, not really giving up the big plays anymore. Our young cornerbacks are playing with a lot of confidence, and you got to think the more they win, the more confident they're going to be, and the better in the long run for the Vikings. So, like I've said, the Vikings are not going to win the Super Bowl. They're not going to win the division, but they may just sneak into a wild card playoff spot with that one extra. Last week I kept saying there was two extra spots, but it's two extra playoff teams overall, so one in each conference. And if you look at where the Vikings sit today, they are only one game out of that seventh spot. So you never know what's going to happen. But that defense is playing well. Eric Wilson is having a Pro Bowl caliber season. Um, the middle linebacker, Eric Kendricks, is also having a Pro Bowl caliber season. Um, Harrison Smith is playing as good as he has ever played, and he's not playing up by the line like he usually does. There's usually about 15 to 20% of the plays he's up on the line, threatening that blitz and dropping him into coverage or actually blitzing. But he is playing coverage like nobody's business. There was a play last night over the middle. Allen Robinson went up to get the ball, and Smith was perfectly timed, hit that ball out of his hands. It was a third down and forced a punt. Now, in the second half of that game last night, the Vikings only gave up 73 total yards. Now, as a whole, they only gave up 148 yards. And I don't care what anybody says. This is an NFL offense. They are getting paid to move the ball. I don't care how bad you are. If your defense is giving up less than 150 total yards, you're doing something right. The O-line was solid last night against that vaunted front seven because they really don't. The Bears don't play much eight in the box. It's mainly their front seven with those linebackers and four down linemen. But the O-line has been playing great. A big surprise this week, Pat Elflein was released and subsequently picked up by the Jets. But he was released, which now gives us Riley Reef, Dakota Dozier, Garrett Bradbury, Ezra Cleveland, and Brian O'Neill as our starting offensive linemen. And I said it last week, and I'll say it again. These guys, they're big, athletic linemen. They're doing what they need to do. And by running the ball 30 to 35 times a game, they're getting downhill. They're pushing that line back. You can't have a big 250, 300-pound lineman dropping back in pass coverage 40 to 50 times a game. It's not going to work out well for you unless you have the players to do that. And Kirk Cousins just is not mobile enough to be able to get out of the pocket sufficiently enough to do that. So the run game is looking good. The O-line is the best I've seen them in many years since the Steve Hutchinson, Matt Khalil, when he was a rookie, since that era. So, Matt Burke in there as well. So, really happy with the O-line and really happy overall with the offensive play. I thought the play calls were fantastic this week. Didn't take any deep shots really that were successful. But the Bears are playing a very soft zone, and our players, even the rookies, we're finding those spots in the zones that were open. So really happy with how the game went. Definitely did not think that they would. Well, I did say that they would win last week, but it should have been much more of a blowout than what it was. But hey, a win's a win, no matter if it's by 1 or 50. My other thought, and I had texted my buddy this, that yesterday, Mr. Demon Hunter, I texted him and said that I completely expect the Vikings to lay an egg because the Vikings are setting us up for yet another heartbreak. So they started 1-5. Now, granted, you take that, let's say the Indianapolis game, they could have won that one. The Titans game, they should have won that one. The Seahawks game, they should have won that one. They could have very well come into this game at, let's see here, 4-3, 4-2, something like that. But in those first few games, they were so young, no experience, and they just didn't have what they needed to finish off games. And that's partly on Mike Zimmer not putting his foot on the opponent's throat. But these last 3 games, they've won 3 in a row now. They're 4-5, right there in the thick of things for a playoff spot. But I believe we're just being set up for more heartbreak. And let me tell you why. Because that's just how the Vikings roll. Now, a few years ago, there was the whole Aaron Rodgers relax comment. I can't relax on this team. Even with getting the ball at the 20-yard line with 40-something seconds left, I still figured the Bears would somehow get down the field and score a winning touchdown with no time remaining because that's how the Vikings roll. But Nick Foles actually was carted off the field with a back and hip injury. Still not sure what that was about. There hasn't been any news from that yet this morning. But they brought in some guy named Brer or something, and he looked like a third-string quarterback. It was awful. But I just feel like the Vikings now the next 3 games are extremely winnable. They have the Cowboys at home, who the Cowboys are a dumpster fire because of their quarterback situation. Who knows who you're going to get? Are you going to get Andy Dalton? Or are you going to get that backup? But they still have Zeke Elliott. They still have a decent defense. They still have Amari Cooper. They still have all these players. And you can't count any NFL team out of any game. The Vikings showed that a couple of weeks ago against Green Bay. But you look at it, you got Dallas, then you got Carolina with Teddy B, who knows if he's going to be healthy. He went down this week, I believe, or he did go down this week. Who knows if he's going to be healthy. And then you got Jacksonville, who we'll talk about them here in a minute. But you got 3 very winnable games right there. You could be sitting at 7-5 going into week 14. Do I think the Vikings are going to win all 3? Probably not. They'll probably lose one of them. But I think it's a real possibility for the Vikings to get to 9-7 and squeak into the playoffs. And once playoffs starts, that's a whole new season, folks. But I do think they could squeak into the playoffs, but there's much better teams out there. And speaking of much better teams, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. They played the Jacksonville Jaguars at home on a very windy and crappy day in Lambeau Field in Green Bay. I still will say that I don't care what the team is and what the history is and the nostalgia. Put a damn roof on all these stadiums, because watching that game was awful. Awful. Because they're not going to be able to kick the ball. It's going to be run. Aaron Rodgers did throw for 325 yards, but most of that came on like 4 throws to MVS. But the Packers did end up beating the Jaguars 24-20, a much closer game than most people thought, especially what I thought. But Packers 24-20. Rodgers goes 24 of 34, 325 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception, which is a very ugly interception. Jones goes 13 carries for 46 yards. He's pretty much fallen off the face of the planet because the teams are focusing on him now, and he can't get loose because Aaron Jones, once considered one of the best running backs in the league, has become an average running back at this point. Now he is injured, probably having some lingering effects of that injury, but he's kind of fallen back into mediocrity, and 46 yards on 13 carries, that's not going to get it done. And like I said before, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, 4 receptions for 149 yards and 1 touchdown. He had one really long one for 70 plus, I think. It went for a touchdown, but Packers keep rolling. They are 7-2, and not much more you can say about it. I mean, they played well enough to win, which they could have very well lost that game, but the Jaguars are awful. They're not going to win many games this year with that team. Doug Marrone is over his head and will probably get fired this year. But next week, like I said, the Vikings go up against Dallas in Minnesota. It should be a pretty good game. I don't think that's going to be a blowout, but the Vikings are playing well, and if they keep playing like this, there's no telling what's going to happen. At the beginning of the year, first 2-3 games, I was like, they might not win a game all year. Tank for Trevor. Still don't think Kirk Cousins is the answer, though. I'm off the Kirk Cousins bandwagon. I like him as a dude, but too many checkdowns, which I think is more Zimmer than Cousins. But he showed a little fire last night. He had a third down pass play to Kyle Rudolph at the end of the game that more or less iced it, which he showed a lot of emotion, and I want to see more of that emotion. But not much more to say. We're going to keep it kind of short this week. Vikings, again, moving up the rankings, 4-5, which at the beginning of the season, if you had told me they would be 4-5, I'd have said that was that's awful. But from where they started to where they are now, am I becoming a believer? Maybe a little bit. However, I've had my heart broke before, and I'm totally ready to have it broke again, because these are our Vikings, and that's what we do. Until next week, this is JR with Monday morning, parentheses, Tuesday morning recap, Skol Vikings. We'll see you next week.